It's been 24 years, 10 months, and 3 days since I said yes to leading with a passion. This is Benjamin Stewart, and you're listening to my podcast, Leading from the Edge. Well, good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us this day. I want to talk to you today about discipline. I know we just finished a 5 or 6 week series on how to break through the ceiling, but in the process of all of that, actually, let me just say it this way. When I was sitting up in my office on our property about 3 weeks ago, getting ready to do a podcast on breaking through the ceiling, I stopped to ask myself the 3 questions that I ask everyone that I coach. Those 3 questions are, number 1, what am I doing that I shouldn't be doing or don't want to be doing? Number 2, what am I not doing that I should be doing or want to be doing? And the third question is, what am I doing good that I need to do more of? And in all of my years of asking those questions of others, I often don't ask myself this next question. What am I going to do about it? What is my plan to stop what I shouldn't be doing and start what I should be doing and doing more of what I'm good at? Now, I'm specifically talking about 4 important areas of my life, and I break it down even when I think about myself or development or even developing others. I think of 4 different areas in our life, and one is our physical life. It's obviously just how we're doing health-wise. What are we doing with our bodies? How are our bodies aging? Or how old are we? What are we capable of doing physically? Next is our spiritual life, and you guys know what that is, but simply, how is my relationship with God, and how submitted to Him and His will am I being? The third area is our emotional life. This is a lot of times our relationships. It's our EQ. It's the strength that we have in how we connect with other people and how we're doing with the situations around us. How do we handle crisis? How do we handle when things aren't going our way? What's our mindset? That's all that emotional life. And the last piece that I put in there is what I call our leadership intelligence. But when we break it down, it's really just how good am I at allowing God to shape the way He can use me? And for a lot of us that listen to this podcast, that can be as a father, that can be in a business, that can be as a pastor, but it's the leadership side of us that is influencing others. And how am I doing in that area? So when I ask myself these 3 questions, and when I asked myself these 3 questions 3 weeks ago, it really hit me. It hit me that in those 4 areas of my life, I've got some pretty significant loss. I've got some pretty significant areas that I'm not winning in. So I'll give you a couple examples. So like in my physical life, the questions of what do I need to stop, what I need to start, what I need to do more of that I'm doing good. I'll just give you an example of what I need to stop. I need to stop eating junk. And when I mean junk, I'm not talking about like ice cream or sweets. I have an issue with Taco Bell. Yes, I still have an issue with Taco Bell. And anybody who knows me knows that I've had an issue with Taco Bell pretty much since college. How bad is it? Well, God got onto me so much about 5 years ago that I fasted Taco Bell for an entire year. Now, for some of you guys, that's so easy, Ben. You can get over that. Well, for me, it was tough. And you would have thought that it would have broken my habits, right? Somewhat. I mean, I don't go there all the time, but let's just say that it is still a weakness. It's something I need to stop doing, right? Or what do I need to start doing in my physical life? It's working out. It has been well over a year since I've worked out, well, not now, but 3 weeks ago, since I'd gone to a gym or went running or did some form of exercise. And I kind of lied to myself when we bought this mountain up here. I thought, oh man, going up and down the mountain, going from the rooms to the kitchen to my office, I'm going to get so much exercise walking and up and down the mountain. And understand, there definitely is exercise walking 400 feet to go downstairs, as we call it. It's really just down the mountain. Is that enough to offset how I'm doing physically? Absolutely not. So there's 3 questions in my spiritual life. Again, this was 3 weeks ago, and I was just really being honest with myself. You know, an example for me was something I enjoy doing, but I should do more of, and that's just spending time with God. I've got a great morning routine. I've got times during the day that I spend with Him. We've got our family devotion time. But if there's one area in my life that I can invest more time in that I know is going to give me the highest ROI or my return on investment, it's spending time with God. And I even feel like my all day is spending time with Him, but just to set aside more alone time, more very present time. In my emotion life, my example would be something I need to start doing. I guess I could say to restart doing. Neely and I used to date, like this is after we got married, because we've told so many people they need a date. In fact, you go to any marriage seminar, any marriage retreat, they're going to say, date your wife. And we have not been doing that for years. Do we spend time together? Yes. Do we pray together every day, often, many times during the day? Do we encourage each other? Absolutely. Do we have devotion time? Yes. As a family, we get together and we do devotions every night. But about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Neely was like, hey, we need a date again. I need just you time, not anything else, just you and me time. And we haven't been doing that for years. So it's something that we said we need to do, right? Just looking at each other, smiling, never arguing, right? Because that would never happen on a date, but it does. But it's okay. It's a date, just the two of us and Gilead, our baby who's now 8 weeks old. But that's the emotional life, and that's what I felt. That's one of the examples from that when I asked myself the 3 questions is something that I need to start doing. And in that leadership piece I was talking about earlier, that 4th area that I feel like all of us have, not just physical, emotional, and spiritual, but we have a leadership side of us, a responsibility to the influence that God is giving us. In the start, stop, and do more of that, my example was something that I'm doing that I need to do more of, and that's coaching. I have tried so many other things these past year and a half to provide for our family. Real estate, marketing, and honestly, they've been successful, yeah. But I really, really know what I'm good at. I know how God designed me, no questions asked. I know that in my design, I love to teach, I love to facilitate, and I love to coach. And so after doing all of those things, I just felt like I got hit in the face because I went through all this whole piece, and then I asked myself, I had to ask myself, what am I doing about it? Or I should say, what am I going to do about it? Because when I looked at my answers, some of them were the same from 3 months ago or even 6 months ago. And I know you're thinking, what? Benjamin Stewart, the business success coach, the person who encourages everybody to have goals, who preaches on having goals and achieving them, failed at his own goals? Absolutely, I fail at my own goals. And certainly I am seeing some goals met. Yeah, absolutely. But when I go down to, like, whether it's, let me correct. I'm seeing a lot of goals met in my doing life in this retreat center and just what God's stirring. I mean, God's grace is so sufficient. But when I sat down and got really digging into my personal life, man, I have put so many things on the back burner. During this working on this retreat center and towards getting an income for our family, I've neglected so many things. The place that makes all the other areas in my life have integrity, and I've neglected having discipline in my life. It's great to have discipline it's great to have success. It's great to get things done, but if we don't have a lifestyle of discipline, then we're missing out on being fully dependable by God and His plan for our life. So when I was done with my podcast, I immediately started writing out my manifesto. And I'm sitting there looking at all these things that I just need to set up the discipline to get them done, right? And look, I know I'm not the only one, right? I mean, can I go through a little list? Maybe stuff that you're facing. I mean, weight anyone? Healthy living anyone? Talking kindly, not getting angry, staying up late, not working on that project that you know you need to? How about those of you that God told to write a book? Should I go on like devotions with your family, dating your spouse, working on your marriage, supporting the church, volunteering, maybe running a marathon? Or how about some bigger ideas like starting that business idea that you've talked about in your own head for 15 years? Or maybe going back to school or launching that ministry that's been in your heart forever, or revamping the church, completely rethinking about how you're doing church. Or maybe it's building up the leadership of your business or investing in your successor. All these things around us that we know we should do. All these things that at one point you knew you could do it. And now it's just on a list. It could be a real list, or it could be the list that's in the back of your head. And what happens when we move away from discipline and we have something on our list for that length of time, it's no longer a list of dreaming. It becomes a list of regrets or shame, because the enemy comes in and discourages us. And I had to ask myself, what's stopping me? And of course, you can't say that without thinking of Galatians chapter 5, verse 7. It says, "You ran well. You did run well. Who hindered you that you should not obey the truth? A little persuasion cometh not of him that called you." And I like this last piece. "A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump." In other words, it just takes that little bit that we don't attend to that ends up infecting the rest of how we even think about the dreams and the visions that God's given us. And I had to ask myself, who's hindered me? And I'll tell you exactly who hindered me. Me. Whether it was a seed planted by the world or the enemy or even my own mind, I had the Spirit of Christ in me and I could have overcome those thoughts. But I lacked one significant area in my life. And when I look around at culture, I would say this is the one thing that's missing in most of those that we know. And in the church, absolutely. And the thing is, by this word, its definition means that we're it completely, not in part. And it's exactly what the letter to the Galatians moves into later on in chapter 5 and verse 16 when it says, This I say then, walk in the Spirit and you will not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. And I had to ask myself, what have I done? What have I allowed into my life that's hindered me in the race to be who God's called me to be? And I ask you the same thing. What has stopped you from being disciplined and really enjoying the journey that you're on, to really run the race as running towards the prize. Discipline. Discipline. Yes, discipline, the word that we all love, the word that really shapes whether or not we accomplish things and we ignore it whether or not we want to do it. In fact, the Word of God mentions that this is not exactly joyous to have discipline in our life, right? To put our bodies in submission and our emotions under submission. But afterwards, it's what yields fruit. It has to produce fruit. And so that's what happened to me 3 weeks ago. I had this encounter with God and my flesh, and this time I chose to make a difference. I remember saying, God, please just open up my heart. Just open up my mind to grow in discipline. And I would have thought that I was a disciplined person. In fact, people looking on the outside probably say, man, Ben is so disciplined. But I know inside of me that I needed God to give me the opportunity to exercise and make strong the character of being disciplined. I just had to start thinking about all that discipline makes available to me. That goals become attainable. Obedience to the Word of God becomes foundational. In fact, if you're to sit down and ask the 3 questions that I talked about earlier, what do you need to start? What is it that you're doing you need to stop? And what is it you're doing good that you need to do more of in the 4 areas of your life? I guarantee you that the areas that you need to do differently are going to come down to discipline. Not knowledge, not knowing what to do, but having the discipline to actually do it. I remember talking to a church employee years and years ago that they felt stuck. They felt like their circumstances, their current job, their past decisions were all keeping them in this same place. And they even struggled with, even if it was God's will now, all those dreams that they had. I remember literally pulling up a chair and sitting down, and I felt like the Holy Spirit just took over and started painting a picture for them. And I remember asking, okay, let's talk about this. Let's dream 5 years from now. What could that look like? And we literally went through what this person dreamed that 5 years could be, what they desired to accomplish, where they wanted to be, even how they wanted to feel 5 years from then. And I said, okay, what if God promised you that those things in 5 years were completely available to you? What if you knew that that was God's plan for your life? What would you do, and what would you do first? I was absolutely amazed as I watched the light bulbs go off in their head. And then I was even more amazed as this person stepped out and started doing those things. I watched them step into new places of discipline in the areas that they could do, like the areas that they could control. And then I saw something incredible happen. I watched God start doing what only He could do. Because there were things on that person's list that they needed favor beyond what their ability was. And I watched God reshape organizations so that that person could walk out what God had in their life. He literally met them on their path of discipline and then just threw favor right on top of it. Fast forward 5 years later, that person was literally ahead of where they dreamed that they would be. And why? Was it God's plan for them? Absolutely, it was God's plan. But did they have to work for it? Would it have happened if they would have kept doing the same thing? I don't think so. And I know that pushes some limits for some people who hear this about we can't change anything about God's plan for our life. And that's a whole nother discussion. I agree with that. At the same time, I disagree even with my own thoughts on it. But did they have to work for it? You bet they did. Absolutely. Because we see so many promises of God, and we have God-given dreams that we're letting become bitter and shamed places in our lives because we're not doing anything with them. Let's move out of regret. Let's get into discipline. So how do we do that? Well, here's what I did, and it may work for you. I did 4 simple things. Number 1, I set my goals, right? Number 2, I set my rules because discipline needs rules. Number 3, I set my time frame. And then number 4, I set up accountability. And let me break that down. So what are our goals? I wanted to have a stronger spiritual, emotional, physical, and leadership life. So I set goals for each one of those areas. Very, very, very tangible goals. Very measurable goals. If it was time with God, I literally had the amount of time. I've written down the amount of time I'm going to have for God to increase it. I also, when it comes to physical, I set in place that I had to work out twice a day for 30 minutes. Let me tell you, last night when I got home from doing a coaching client and it was late and I stayed up to spend time with my wife and dinner and everything, by the time I went to go my second workout, it was almost 10 o'clock. And let me tell you how excited I was to do that second 30 minutes. Not very excited, especially when I got back and realized I still had half a gallon of water to drink to fulfill my discipline for that day. But you know what? I'm on day 23, and there's no way I'm going to miss walking out this day in discipline. I'm going to walk this out because I will be a disciplined person now. So very, very, very tangible and measurable goals. Number 2, I set the rules. For me, I set the rule that if it's discipline, then I have to have discipline. In other words, I have to do it every day. And if I miss a day, I start over. Why? Because it's not discipline if I miss it here and there, right? So for the time frame that I set, which is point number 3, if I miss a day, I'm starting over and I have to do that many days. I love the rocks mentality. So point number 3 is I set time. I love the rocks mentality that you read about in Steve Covey's book or in Gino Wickman's Traction book, that 90-day mentality. I love that. But for this one, I changed it up a little bit. And I said, I saw it somewhere. Someone talked about 75 days and said, oh, that's a good number. I like 75. So I decided 75 and said 75 days straight of discipline in these goals in my spiritual, emotional, and physical and leadership parts of my life. So number 1 was, what are the goals? Number 2, I set the rules. Number 3, I set the time. And lastly, I set up accountability. I literally went online and invited 30 other men to do this with me. Why 30 men? I don't know. Why men? I do know that because I really value my relationship with my wife and I don't want to have an accountability relationship with another female. So I had to have it with men. So I invited these 30 other God-fearing, loving men, and I said, here's what I'm doing and why. It has blown me away as I've seen man after man step up and encourage and pray for and applaud integrity even when it hurts, to have integrity even when it means starting over. It keeps me honest, sure, but I would say I'm an honest person, so I think it does more than even that. It allows me the opportunity to operate in honesty and integrity. Sometimes it's not a challenging, it's an opportunity to exercise it. But it also gives me the motivation because I'm part of a team. So what does this have to do with leading from the edge? Well, if you're going to be the best version of God's plan for your life, it doesn't happen by being blindfolded and waiting to be led by the hand. No, it happens in the dreaming, in the visioning that God wakes you up to think about. It has to do with the relationships that are in your life, and it has to do with all that God is stirring on the inside of you. It even has to do with where you find yourself frustrated. Yesterday, I got to be part of a company launch of EOS for their whole team. It was a big event, big party. And when I heard the team integrator speak about what the last 90 days have meant to him, he said something. He said, "We had dreams for our company for over 11 years just sitting on a sheet of paper. And every year it almost felt like a blight or like it was in our face that we hadn't done anything with those things. With discipline and goals that they set in place, over the last 90 days, they've accomplished literally all of those things that were on their list. 11 years of feeling the weight got knocked out of the park in just 90 days of discipline. That, my friend, is leading from the edge. So whatever God has called you to do, ask yourself, what am I going to do to make it happen? Leadership, in my opinion, means that every day you strive to be at least one step ahead, at least one experience in front of those that you've been given the gift of leading. It's not a matter of being the best, and it's not a badge that you get to wear. It's not even about being the brightest person in the room. It's about having the courage to lead. It takes commitment, it takes persistence, and it takes patience. And we'll throw in there today, it takes discipline. But above all, it takes an everyday God experience. I'm Benjamin Stewart, and until next time, go lead from the edge.